Well, folks, I definitely wasn't planning on having a stream today. I wasn't planning on starting a live stream as late as 9 p.m. Eastern. We're getting close to here. Oh, it is 9 p.m. on the dot. Wasn't planning on having this live stream, but a pretty important announcement was just put out there by the Canadian government, and it's not so often that they release announcements at like 7 p.m. Eastern. So this announcement was just live, and we're going to watch it here live together so you can know what's going on. It has to do with the Canadian election interference and the alleged network of nations trying to interfere in Canada's business. Let's get right into this. I think if you're watching this channel, you probably already know the gist of the situation. But now, amidst pressure from all sides of the government, it seems that Trudeau is coming up with some sort of plan as to how he's going to deal with this. If you're tuning in here, let me know that you're here. Usually I have a coffee on this streams, but it's 9 p.m., so I've switched beverages. Gonna have a little steamy as we watch this if you want to hang out with me too. But let's get right into this, and I'm gonna pause and provide commentary as we go as to what exactly is happening here. It's good to see you here again. For those of you who are on the earlier live stream today that was actually planned, this one is a short notice live stream that I'm just bringing up because it seems like there's something rather important going on. I haven't watched this, so this is my first take and likely yours.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Je suis très heureux ce soir d'être accompagné des ministres Leblanc, Mendechi.
The nice thing about this, when we're doing it a little after the fact, is that we can skip over the French parts here for the folks like me who are watching this that aren't that great at French.
Rodriguez et Joly. On est ici aujourd'hui a lot contre l'ingérence étrangère. In the last couple of weeks, Canadians have been hearing and reading a lot about the issue of attempted foreign interference, particularly from China, in our elections. There have been questions raised about our democracy, our national security agencies, our parliament, and even our sovereignty. These questions strike us to the very core as Canadians. Les Canadiens portent attention à ces questions parce qu'ils savent importance. The democratic process in our elections, in our institutions, is of utmost importance. This is not and should never be a partisan issue. I understand that people want answers and Canadians deserve reassurance. I will get to the details in a moment, but today I'm announcing that I will be appointing an independent special rapporteur who will have a wide mandate and make expert recommendations on combating interference and strengthening our democracy.
Okay, so he's saying he'll have a special rapporteur who's going to look at election interference and what's gone on here that he's going to be appointing. Right off the bat, I think a lot of people are going to be frustrated that he's the one appointing it and it's not a bipartisan sort of panel of folks choosing someone to look more deeply into this. Let's keep going and I'll give my take. Wow.
But first, I want to lay out some of what we've been doing and will do further to continue to protect our democracy and our institutions. In Canada, we believe deeply in the values of freedom, openness, and dialogue. These values are not universally shared by every government around the world. Indeed, I don't know if in our lifetime we've seen democracy in a more precarious place.
Thanks so much for the super chat there. Deborah McDonald says Trudeau equals I admire China. That, of course, referring to the clip that a lot of people have brought up, talking about how the Chinese government can be more quick with its control over the green transition. That was the context in which he said that. But of course, not a clip that has gone over well with a lot of people. Thank you for the support with the super chat, Deborah. Let's keep going.
Many state actors and non-state actors want to foster instability here and elsewhere to advance their own interests. We have long known, and an independent report confirmed it again last week, that the Chinese government and other regimes like Iran and Russia have attempted to interfere not just in our democracy, but in our country in general, whether it's our institutions, our businesses, our research facilities, or in the daily lives of our citizens. This is not a new problem. But before we came into office, there was no dedicated process to counter foreign interference in our elections. We saw the impacts of foreign interference in places like the United States and in France during their elections in 2016 and 2017. These threats evolve and continue to evolve. We took big steps to protect the integrity of our democracy. Things we did in response to the changes we saw around us, because that's what responsible leadership does. Lors des deux dernières élections, en 2018, les résultats, this panel is part of a mechanism, a protocol, that we created in early 2019 so that independent, expert public servants can communicate clearly and impartially with Canadians during an election in the event of incidents that threaten the integrity of the federal election. After 2019, the panel and the protocol were reviewed by James Judd, former director of CSIS. And after the 2021 election, the panel and the protocol were again reviewed, this time by Maurice Rosenberg, former senior deputy minister under both Conservative and Liberal governments.
Okay, so this is an interesting point, and one I need to clarify here for you. Again, thank you for the super chat there, Deborah McDonald. Why did we not need this prior to Trudeau? Yeah, talking about the sort of things that Trudeau's government set up to try to combat foreign interference. I think that Deborah's referring to there, the panel and the critical incident protocol, as well as Ensacop, which is a panel of parliamentarians that have top security clearance to help sort of monitor security agencies. Here he's sort of trying to make the point largely that that we have been doing a good job on interference by setting up these multiple different panels and committees. Of course, there are some problems with the panels and committees. They have been independently reviewed, most recently by Maurice Rosenberg. Some people are saying it's a little bit of a conflict of interest because Rosenberg was the former head of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. But regardless, Rosenberg was a part of both Liberal and Conservative governments in the past. So some will also say that he's independent and the review is effective. The main problem with the panel being, and this was included in the review, is that it's not clear to Canadians what threshold would have to be met of interference in order to have them actually do something. But it seems like Trudeau's sort of hinting that there will be more review of this panel. So he's sort of pointing to the fact that it was reviewed, trying to say, hey, our government is doing enough on interference and we're about to do more.
Both independent reviews made recommendations that we've studied closely. Between the 2019 and 2021 elections, using Mr. Judd's recommendations, we updated the protocol and strengthened it. We are now reviewing Mr. Rosenberg's recommendations, and Minister Leblanc is working on an implementation plan for as quickly as possible. Today, all political leaders agree that the election outcomes in 2019 and in 2021 were not impacted by foreign interference. Tous les chefs des autres partis.
Wow, oh my goodness, Deborah. Thanks again for the support. We're going to keep going here, but Gina Daigle and Suzanne Eckstein and Susie Hart and Renee BJ were all gifted memberships by Deborah to the channel. So thank you so much for your support, Deborah, and those folks in the chat. I give Deborah a shout out there, but let's continue here. Again, I appreciate the support, Deborah. It's not so often that people support the channel in the way, so I really do appreciate it.
Ils sont d'accord que l'issue des élections de 2019 et 2021 n'a pas été impacté par une ingérence étrangère. But even if it didn't change the results of any of our elections, any interference attempt by any foreign actor is troubling and serious. Attempted interference is something that's been happening for a long time in Canada and in many other countries around the world. But how it happens is evolving, including with the rise of technology and social media. This is why, since 2015, we've taken big steps to protect the integrity of our democracy. In 2017, we created the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians so that top-secret cleared MPs and senators can look deeply into these issues. Le Comité des parlementaires sur la sécurité nationale et le renseignement réunit les représentants de tous les partis reconnus à la Chambre des communes, ainsi que des représentants. Ensacop has examined foreign interference in the past and tabled a comprehensive report to the public and to Parliament. This report focused on the period between 2015 and 2018. They also looked at the classified report reviewing the work of the panel in the 2019 election. In 2018, we passed legislation to strengthen elections financing laws to keep foreign money out. And when we hosted the G7 summit that year in Charlevoix, we established the Rapid Response Mechanism as a way for the G7 countries to respond to diverse and evolving foreign threats to democracy. In 2019.
So the point of what he's doing right here is laying out all the ways that the Liberals have taken steps to try to combat this foreign interference. They're saying, we know that this is happening, we know that it has happened, but we still will say that the 2019 and 2021 election results would not have been impacted by this interference, but there was interference, and it was serious interference. Now he's listing out all the things that have happened since the Liberal government came to power to trying to counteract this kind of foreign interference, like the creation of Ensacop, or I think that's how he pronounces it, Ensacop, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. That didn't exist before, as well as the panel and the critical election incident protocol, the rapid response protocol that he's bringing up right now, sort of trying to provide a mountain of evidence saying we have been doing and we are doing enough on this interference. That's the point of this press conference, it seems. But I think that a lot of people aren't going to be totally happy with this response, given that it's not including a public inquiry that's being called for by the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Bloc Québécois, and something that the NDP are considering a vote of no confidence, which could plunge us into an election if they push with enough pressure. Questionable whether or not the NDP will actually do that or not.
We brought in our plan to protect democracy. This plan included the creation of the panel of independent public servants that I mentioned earlier. It also included the creation of the Security and Intelligence Threats to Election Task Force, which is made up of our top security agencies and advises the panel on potential threats. On a aussi créé l'Office de surveillance des activités en matière de sécurité nationale. On a déposé une government has done to address foreign interference since 2015, and we're working on doing more. But we have to make sure that we're taking responsible steps without jeopardizing the work of our intelligence community and nonpartisan officials to keep Canadians safe. Today, I spoke with David McGuinty, the head of Ensacop, and with Marie Deschamps, the head of NCIRA. I underscored that Canadians need to have faith in their institutions and deserve answers and transparency. I talked with them about undertaking urgent work on the issue of foreign interference within their mandates. Aujourd'hui, j'ai parlé avec David McGuinty, président du CPO et de la transparence dans le dossier de l'ingérence in the House of Commons. In the House includes representatives from all recognized parties in the House of Commons, plus representatives from the Senate. They all already have top secret clearances, so they can review the activities of our national security and intelligence agencies. Ensacop has already received the classified version of the report reviewing the work of the 2021 panel, and will be updating their last report reviewing foreign interference with a focus on our elections. When democratic institutions are under attack, it is just that it be parliamentarians, elected officials, who should be stepping up to protect those institutions. This is why we created Ensacop and gave them the tools to review these matters and report their findings and recommendations to Parliament.
Wow. Okay. So big, interesting stuff here being said by Trudeau. And thank you again, Deborah McDonald, being one of the biggest supporters of this channel so far on the lives. I've never caught you live. I watch every one of your videos. Nice to give a couple bucks and a thank you live to know this crazy Canadian in Northern Alberta loves your videos. Thank you so much to this crazy Canadian in Northern Alberta, Deborah McDonald, for watching. A huge supporter of the channel. I appreciate it. So interesting stuff, saying he's talked to the heads of Ensacop to look into this further. Again, not sure if Canadians are going to be fully satisfied for this. And I'm realizing now it's 9 p.m. And I think that these bright lights on me, for these studio lights in the Russell Matthews studio, which is just my office, should go off. I think we're going to transition to the stream after dark. So let's see how this looks. Now we can chill out a little bit. Yeah, let's go double. There we go. How do you like that? You can still see me. Good enough. Easier on the eyes on my end. All right, let's keep going. Again, thank you, Deborah. That's so nice of you.
NCIRA is an external and independent expert body designed to review the collection and use of sensitive intelligence by government, including for all of our national security agencies, and ensure that they are meeting the high standards Canadians expect of them. They are well placed to determine how the system is working across intelligence agencies and government departments, what information flowed or didn't flow properly, and why. They also produce reports publicly to Parliament. Despite all of this, I know that there are people out there who don't believe that this is enough, and I get that. This is why we're entrusting further work to someone impartial. In the coming days, we will appoint an eminent Canadian to the position of independent special rapporteur, who will have a wide mandate to make expert recommendations on protecting and enhancing Canadians' faith in our democracy. In the coming weeks, the independent special rapporteur will be responsible for informing the work of NCIRA and Ensacop and any other existing processes like those by Elections Canada, and to identify any gaps in our system. The independent special rapporteur will make public recommendations which could include a formal inquiry or some other independent review process. Dans les prochains jours, on va nommer.
Okay, so this is how this is the way he's going. First of all, people aren't going to be too happy with the fact that they are the one doing the appointing of this special rapporteur who's going to be looking into these types of things. So that's one sort of point there. But he's saying that this person will have full scope. They'll be able to look at everything, look at all the reports. Of course, we can't have everything be public because it's national security, important to national security. But at the same time, you need someone to look at it and then report to the public. So he's saying this is what this person is going to do. And it could even mean that they recommend having a public inquiry after this. But at that point, it's kind of like you sort of pushed the ball or like kicked the can down the road. It's going to take this person 3+ months probably to come up with any kind of report. And then maybe the political climate has moved on. Maybe the news cycle has moved on and there's less pressure. So it's interesting to see. And thank you so much, Watchful Eagle, for tuning in and supporting the channel. I appreciate you. That's super nice of you, Watchful Eagle. Give them some love in the chat. I appreciate it. It helps me do more of these live streams when there's nice folks like you supporting.
Un éminent Canadien au poste de rapporteur spécial. Et celui, people have expressed many different views about the steps we should be taking to answer questions about foreign interference. To me, it comes down to two things: that our democratic institutions are safe from foreign interference, and that Canadians have confidence that it is so. This impartial, respected person will ensure transparency and also protection of our institutions, members of our intelligence agencies, and all Canadians. Now, some people have argued strongly that a public inquiry is the necessary next step. Some others have pointed out the flaws and challenges of a public inquiry. That's why we will ask the independent special rapporteur, as one of the first tasks of their mandate, to provide the government with a recommendation as to what the appropriate next step should be, whether it be an inquiry, an investigation, or a judicial review, and what the scope of that work may be. and we will abide by their recommendation. Comme je l'ai dit, on a fait beaucoup de travail.
Okay, that is actually really significant, right? He's saying that if this person that we appoint says that we then need to do a public inquiry or a judicial review or some sort of other action, we will listen to them and we will do that, but we won't sort of take the pressure from the other political parties who are calling for a public inquiry. He says some people have argued that a public inquiry is the next step. Others have said that there's flaws with this. If he's talking broadly, yes, there's been lots of debate on both sides. If we're talking within the committees, it's been all NDP Conservatives and Bloc Québécois saying we need an inquiry, and the Liberals saying an inquiry might not be make the most sense. Now there are points on both sides here, right? The public inquiry might be better for Canadians to actually have trust in the electoral institutions, because that's a super important thing, that we continue to trust our elections and have faith that they are held free and fair. That's important, and a public inquiry could help with that. But on the other hand, a public inquiry, we wouldn't get the documents that we might expect to get because of national security reasons, or for national security reasons, right? A public inquiry, it gets us no more information than we're already getting in the committees, apart from, I will say this, apart from the fact that it wouldn't be partisan, right? We wouldn't have the bickering back and forth. That's what we've got in the committees. That's what we've got between the Conservatives and the Liberals, especially, bickering back and forth, making this a you are worse, no, you are worse, like pissing match, right? That's what's happening in committees. A public inquiry would mean that there's not that kind of partisanship. Now, but like I said, a public inquiry, we wouldn't get any more documents than we can already get in the committee meetings, and it would be rather expensive. So there are points on both sides here. Trudeau's saying, this person that we appoint, if they say we should do a public inquiry, if that's their recommendation, and this is the first thing we're going to ask them to do, is find out whether we should do one or not, then we will do one. But again, that might not be enough for people, given that it is Trudeau that is appointing this special rapporteur, rather than a bipartisan panel of folks from all parties who get to collectively choose who this person's going to be. And thanks again, Deborah McDonald. What a huge support tonight. I appreciate you in the super chats and all the support from everyone who likes and subscribes these videos and hits the notification bell so you know when we're going to be live next. Let's keep going here with this announcement.
Mais on sait qu'on peut continuer d'agir avec d'autres mesures dès maintenant pour protéger nos institutions, notre démocratie et les Canadiens contre l'ingérence étrangère. That's why I've tasked Minister Mendicino to launch, later this week, a consultation to guide how we will set up a new Foreign Influence Transparency Registry in Canada. We need to make sure there is transparency and accountability from those who advocate on behalf of foreign governments, while protecting communities who are often both targeted by attempts at foreign interference and who feel targeted when xenophobia and fear-mongering overtake legitimate concern for our democracy and national security.
That's actually rather significant. Kudos for that, at least, right? You've heard the story of Kenny Chiu, likely, right? This is the Conservative member of Parliament in Vancouver who was allegedly very heavily smeared in news reports that were largely circulated on WeChat across the Canadian-Chinese diaspora in Vancouver. And he said that because of that targeting, he says from the CCP creating those false media stories that paint him as anti-China, because he didn't win his seat. That's what he says. And he says that he was targeted because of the legislation he put forward, which was a foreign agent registry. And that seems to be what the language that Trudeau's using here, that he wants Marco Mendicino, one of his cabinet ministers, to set up a foreign agent registry. He uses a different word for it. He says foreign interference transparency registry. This is something that China, or allegedly, was very frustrated about with all the stuff that went down with Kenny Chiu.
It's very important that we start with this consultation because we have to be mindful of history anytime we're talking about registries of foreigners in our country. I've also tasked Minister Mendicino to immediately establish a counter-foreign interference coordinator in Public Safety Canada. This office will ensure that we're taking on these issues across government in a coordinated way. J'ai demandé au ministre Mendicino de lancer plus tard cette semaine une...
Wow, there's more to this than I thought there was. I thought it was just going to be this special rapporteur who's going to make recommendations, but it seems like he's trying to sort of set up more positions to counter this, right? Now, detractors will say he's just doing this for show, right? To show, hey, I am tough on interference, even if the potential interference worked out this time that it helped the Liberals in those elections. He's saying, despite that, I am tough on interference. Here's all of the things that we added previously that didn't exist before the Conservative government. And then here are all the things that we're going to do now because things are getting more serious here. And he's seeing that, hey, maybe this is going to impact my voters.
Consultation pour guider la mise en place d'un nouveau registre de transparence de l'influence étrangère au Canada. Je lui ai aussi demandé d'établir immédiatement au sein de Sécurité publique Canada un bureau national chargé de la coordination de la lutte contre l'ingérence étrangère. Ce bureau permettra de coordonner les efforts déployés dans l'ensemble du gouvernement. In the next, any outstanding record, a plan tasked pour s'attaquer à ces problèmes. I've also tasked Minister LeBlanc and the Clerk of the Privy Council to review and bring forward a plan to implement any outstanding recommendations from Ensacop, the Rosenberg report, and any other reviews on these matters in the next 30 days. J'ai également chargé le ministre Leblanc et la greffière.
Okay, so we're also going to get a report in the next 30 days of what's been said in Ensacop and potentially what was on that panel. Is that what they were saying as well? And again, oh my goodness, Deborah, thank you for the support on this channel. It really helps out. Every little bit does. Deborah McDonald, again, saying if Trudeau wants it and Marco is in charge, God help Canada. I mean, that's going to be the sentiment, right, from a lot of people is that the fact that you are the person appointing this special rapporteur and the fact that it's your cabinet ministers who are setting this up, for a lot of people, I don't think that will be enough. Although for another group of people, I think that this will may be enough to say, yes, I see that the Liberals are taking this seriously. So this is where it comes down to personal. Like your take on this, right? Do you think that this is enough from Trudeau? Or do you think that it sort of feels empty because everything is sort of being set up and appointed by either him or the Liberal government, right? This is the challenge, right? A lot of people are going to have different opinions on this, but I appreciate the support again, Deborah McDonald. If Trudeau wants it and Marco's in charge, God help Canada. That's certainly what a lot of folks are likely thinking.
Du Conseil privé de présenter un plan pour la mise en œuvre de toutes les recommandations en suspens formulées par le CPSNR et dans le rapport Rosenberg, ainsi que d'examiner ce plan et toute autre question connexe dans les 30 Investing prochains jours. And finally, today I can announce that we're investing $5.5 million to build capacity of civil society organizations to combat disinformation. Because we know disinformation, often generated abroad, can be a real threat to our elections, and it's a threat that the federal government cannot combat alone. Je veux être très clair. Toute attaque to bring back the two Michaels after they were arbitrarily detained in China. The two Michaels stood firm when we worked day and night to bring back the two Michaels after they were arbitrarily detained in China, including over the course of the 2019 and 2021 elections. As Canadians, we all felt a collective effort to work together to bring them home, and we felt tremendous relief when we finally got them home. But let's remember that throughout, there were repeated calls by eminent Canadians, both Conservative and Liberal, to simply capitulate to the Chinese government, to give in to their demands, to ignore our extradition treaty with the United States, and ignore the values and the principles of rule of law on which Canada is grounded. But we didn't. We stood strong as a government. We stood strong as Canadians for our values and for the rule of law. And we got them home that way. That's what a Prime Minister does. That's what responsible leadership is. Foreign interference is a complex landscape that should not be boiled down to sound bites and binary choices. and it should certainly not be about partisan politics.
I'll agree with that point, that this shouldn't be about partisan politics. This is an important thing, right? And there are pros and cons to both sides in how we deal with this. However, the fact that the sort of accusations and the leaks in the government sort of point towards the Liberal government not taking this seriously enough, that's one sort of side's take. The fact that these CSIS documents were leaked shows that CSIS individuals risked the persecution and jail time under the Security of Information Act to leak this, right? The fact that they did that is pointing towards, hey, maybe this information was given to Trudeau earlier. Maybe he was briefed on the whole Han Dong thing. Maybe it was more serious and maybe he did turn a blind eye to it. That's what some folks will think. But certainly this shouldn't be a partisan thing. We should be trying to get to the bottom of what's going on here and figure out a way that we can make sure that Canadians have faith in our electoral systems. But it's an extremely challenging thing to have faith in your electoral systems when, for reasons of national security, you can't ever have the full picture of the story that happened here, right? So the point of what he's doing here is trying to say, yo, like, we can't show you all the documents. I'm sorry. Like, what's he supposed to do? He can't show you the documents for national security reasons. This is coming from CSIS specifically, not necessarily Trudeau. But whether or not this is enough for people to believe him, that's an entirely different question. I'm curious what you think in chat. If this will be enough, all of these sort of measures you're giving, or if it's just totally undercut by the fact that it's largely appointed by either the Prime Minister or his cabinet members.
As politicians, we work hard on building trust with Canadians every single day. But it is also our duty to do everything we can so that Canadians can trust our institutions now and into the future, because our institutions will and must outlast every politician. En tant que politicien, on travaille dans l'avenir. Our institutions are the foundations of our democracy. Even when they're strong, even when they're sturdy, if there's a perception that they might not be, it needs to be addressed. And we need to work beyond partisanship to work together. Canada is one of the most stable democracies in the world, but that didn't happen by accident, and it will not continue without effort. So to all Canadians, this is an issue that we continue to take extremely seriously, and we will continue this work to uphold and strengthen your confidence in our democracy in Canada. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Okay, interesting. I think we're likely going to get to reporter questions here, which is where most of the juicy stuff is, honestly. In every single one of these formal either political interviews, press conferences, or economic with the Bank of Canada that we cover, it's always in the questions that we get the juiciest stuff. I do want to talk about one thing, though, that he mentioned there. And he says in very serious tone, it's our duty to do everything we can to make sure that Canadians keep their faith in our institutions. And this points towards a theme that's been happening in Canada for quite a long time, and it's that Canadians are starting to lose faith in the institutions that keep our society and our democracy together, right? We look at and this is a broader issue in North America as well. We look at the questions around elections in that institution, but also we look at the credibility of central banks in Canada, what the Bank of Canada has done and what the Federal Reserve has done in terms of the response to the COVID pandemic with their quantitative easing experimentation, which has resulted in a lot more new money being added to the system. People say it's like a money printer. It's not actually being printed. It's just zeros on a computer. But you know what I mean, that more money added to the system via quantitative easing has sort of, in some people's eyes, lost credibility for these central banks. So this is a broader theme across Canada and the rest of the world, that folks are less trusting in the institutions that are important to keep society strong, right? I think that's pretty interesting. But let's get into these questions, because this is where the juicy stuff really tends to start.
Sir, merci le Premier ministre. We have 20 minutes for questions from the media. Nous avons 20 minutes pour les questions des médias et on va commencer avec TVA.
Bonjour Monsieur Trudeau, Olivier Ferrand-Boissé de TVA. Vous savez, il y a plusieurs voix qui sont élevées là, pour une enquête publique.
Again, we're gonna skip forward.
Chargera de déterminer
the French
les
here.
prochaines partis politiques sur les canaux indépendants des falloirs privés au courant des derniers
That's a lot of French.
et nos institutions
You mentioned that there have been a number.
Okay, here we go.
qu'effectivement on est en train.
Oh, and before we get to it, thank you so much in the pocket for the support here. Obviously, not a big fan of Jagmeet Singh saying these guys are globalists, and that's a take that a lot of people will have, is that they're not too fond of Jagmeet Singh, especially the way that he's rather been propping up the Liberal government right now. And thank you again for the support, Deborah. I'm not too big of a fan of the CBC. Yeah, I mean, if Polyev wins, it seems like that will be an area that will get less funding in the future.
Train de faire tout ce qui est nécessaire pour protéger notre démocratie.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. Mackenzie Gray. You mentioned that there have been.
This is Mackenzie Gray. This is one of the people that has propagated most largely Sam Cooper's reports, which was like the bombshell investigation that was sort of dropped here. Mackenzie Gray, part of Global News, that Trudeau is probably pretty pissed at because of how big of an issue this has become after their reporting.
A number of people have been calling for a public inquiry that includes the opposition and many other eminent Canadians. Can you explain why you need a special rapporteur to make that decision for you?
We've actually seen a significant amount of debate amongst experts, amongst prominent, eminent Canadians, some in political parties, some not, as to whether or not a public inquiry is the right way to move forward. And further, the question of what exactly would be the terms of any formal inquiry, what form it should take, what the Constitution should be, what the mandate and tasks should be, what kind of clearances it should have. All those questions are really important in going to establishing a body or a process that Canadians will have confidence in once it's done. We've seen a level of partisanship around this question that, for me, requires us to take a step back and to task an eminent, unimpeachable expert, respected and trusted by Canadians, to be able to make recommendations as to what the best path is forward. As I've said a number of times, we have a number of bodies, of task forces, of expert groups, from Ensacop to NCIRA to others, who have been tasked with keeping our democracy safe, protecting us from foreign interference. An independent expert to examine the landscape of everything that we have to fight against interference and give confidence to Canadians, make recommendations on how it must be optimized to deliver that confidence to Canadians, and what, if necessary, we should be doing more, whether it be a formal inquiry, a commission, an examination, a panel of retired judges, a judicial review, or what have you. Making sure that that process, whatever process is necessary, is unimpeachable from the very beginning, is going to be part of reassuring Canadians that election integrity and foreign interference is something that, as a country, we are taking with the appropriate level of seriousness and rigor.
Okay, interesting response to that. And also, again, thank you very much, Deborah. Feels safe. Yeah, I appreciate your support there, Deborah, from a fellow crazy Canadian there. Thank you so much. Justin Trudeau here is saying, this is what the question was, like, why do we even need a special rapporteur to decide whether or not we need a public inquiry into this issue? Can't we just sort of decide that ourselves amongst the political parties? To that, Trudeau says, hey, well, we've seen a lot of debate on both sides to why it would be good to have a public inquiry, and also why it might be problematic to have a public inquiry, including the cost and the lack of the lack of classified documents that could be used in such an inquiry because it is public. And so this is sort of what he points to, and he says also it's very important to consider for this type of inquiry, if we go the route of an inquiry, we need to, it's not clear what the scope of this inquiry would be. Would it be just about China? Would it be about every single possible country that has ever tried to interfere in Canada, vis-a-vis all of them? Or like, maybe that vis-a-vis is not the right way to say that. But there's a lot of countries that are trying to interfere with other countries, right? It's not just China, it's not just Russia. So we don't know what the scope of the inquiry should be. And he's saying that in committee, things have gotten pretty partisan, and we've watched them here live on the channel too, right? Like, I've watched even more than what's on the channel because I like to watch it at 3x speed to get through it all quickly. And it has gotten quite partisan. It does seem like the Liberals are saying one thing, the Conservatives are saying the other thing. Mark Garrison of the Liberals is hyper partisan in that committee. Mark Garrison, yeah, he's kind of frustrating, as well as Sam Cooper. Not Sam Cooper. What's his name? The Conservative member of Parliament on the Proc committee has also been very combative about trying to make the Prime Minister look bad, saying we need to talk to your chief of staff, Katie Telford, and not bending on that whatsoever. So it has gotten quite partisan. So you can sort of see a point here that somebody independent needs to make the decision on what we do here. But again, it won't be enough for people because Trudeau, it seems, is the one that's going to appoint this nonpartisan person. So. But I do understand the point, right? That we need to have someone who's not a Liberal, not a Conservative, decide what we need to do about this. Because right now, it kind of just looks like every other side trying to make the other side look like it has like the cake on their face. Is that the saying? Dirt on your face? I'm not sure.
Ensacop, we've already heard from Mr. Singh and Mr. Poilievre saying that that's not a process that they think for this situation makes sense. Mr. Singh says it's not public. Mr. Poilievre says it actually traps the MPs. They get secret information. They can't talk about it. Why do you think that's a proper venue to be able to handle these specific issues?
When I was in opposition, we watched Mr. Harper's government refused to give any role to parliamentarians in matters of national security. Whether it was issues around Afghan detainees or other threats to national security, the answer invariably was, trust us, we're the government, we have clearance, we're going to keep Canadians safe. That was the answers that the government at the time, which included the current leader of the opposition, gave to us in opposition, gave to Canadians. We disagreed. One of our debates in the run-up to the 2015 election was over Bill C-51, national security, strengthening of national security rules. And one of the commitments we made to Canadians in that election is we would create what most other leading democracies already have, which is a national security and intelligence committee of parliamentarians from all different parties, including in the Senate, who would receive the necessary top secret clearances to dig into everything that our national security agencies did. Now, it doesn't surprise me that Mr. Poilievre continues to object to that creation. He was opposed to us empowering MPs to get those clearances to look into national security issues from even before we became government. But those MPs from all different parties get the necessary clearances to dive deep into the actions and responsibilities and mandates of our national security and intelligence agencies, and then they write reports on what they've seen, what they've learned, that get released to Parliament and to the public.
Okay, so this is a really interesting question, and I got to provide a little context so that you can understand like the full scope of it, right? Because not everyone goes really into depth on this stuff because it takes a lot of time. First of all, thank you so much, Deborah McDonald, again, saying, why is Trudeau sending tax dollars to Ukraine? Did I vote for this? No, some folks are frustrated with that, although, yeah, it seems like we don't specifically get to vote for where our tax dollars go. We just get to vote for who represents us and makes the decisions about those tax dollars, certainly. And also, also thanks so much in the pocket who says LMAO, these guys are running out of ghosts to slay. Yeah, perhaps that's where we're at this point. Yeah, but talking about this specific question is like, why is Ensacop a good venue to talk about this stuff? Ensacop being the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, the sort of board of parliamentarians who are given top secret security clearance so that they can review what our security agencies are doing and provide reports to the public about the security agencies. That's Ensacop. Mackenzie Gray is questioning, why is this a good place for us to be talking about this stuff when they can't actually tell us anything because of national security reasons? Trudeau says, hey, back when Harper was, and talk about trying to not make things partisan, being the whole point of his speech here, and then immediately going and talking about how it was worse under the Conservatives and how it would be worse under Poilievre. This is kind of what his comments are, right? How he says, like, Harper didn't want us to have insight into our national security, and he says Poilievre would oppose Ensacop. So he's kind of trying to make the opponent look bad in this situation. So a little bit rich, given he's talking about not wanting to be partisan on this type of issue. So I think that maybe he'll look back on that tomorrow morning when he's looking at this and say, hey, maybe that wasn't a great idea to talk about it in that way. But he says that we need to have parliamentarians in national security top clearance roles so that they can monitor national security agencies, because parliamentarians are actually democratically elected, right? As opposed to security officials who aren't voted for, right? So I think it does make sense to have something like Ensacop is what he says. I like Ensacop. I think that has a little bit more of a ring to it. That's just my personal preference. But yeah, he's saying that this is a good venue. They write reports for us. They tell the public what's going on with our national security agencies. But really, do they? Because they can't include information that's sensitive, right? So some people will say Ensacop doesn't make sense to exist because they get trapped with information. They get the information from these security officials, but if they see a problem with it, who are they going to bring it to? Are they going to bring it to the public? No, they can't tell people in the public that. They can't even tell certain members of parliament who don't have the security clearance the information they learn. So there are questions around whether or not Ensacop is a proper or is the best way to go about our national security. And thank you again, Deborah McDonald, for gifting 5 memberships to other people who are viewing this. Take a look to see if you've become a member now. Felicia, Savoya, Mo, Kim, SW, and Glenn Robinson, you've all just gotten memberships to the channel, which is heavily appreciated, Deborah, for supporting the channel like that. And I think you can actually put like little special emojis of my face if you're a member in here. Maybe I should make more emojis of this, but you can sort of see that there if you want to play around with it, if you click the emoji button in the chat. But anyways, we'll continue here, and we can figure out exactly what they're talking about.
So their threshold of being top secret cleared allows them to look into everything that's going on in our national security agencies and then turn to Canadians to say there are shortcomings in this aspect of what's happening, this aspect of things are been doing well, they need to improve this, they need to improve that. That's not secret. That is MPs doing their jobs, looking into top secret affairs, and then creating a public report evaluating the work of our national security agencies and highlighting where there need to be improvements that they're then accountable to, because Ensacop will be looking into them again in the coming years, and parliamentarians will continue to report publicly on the work they do. Yes, it's a committee of parliamentarians with top secret clearances, but their work is to dig into the top secret work being done by our intelligence agencies and tell all Canadians about whether that's being done right or wrong and how it needs to be improved. That misunderstanding of the nature of Ensacop is something that hopefully this important work that they continue to do will shed a little more light on for more Canadians.
Jordan Gowling, CTV News. So what can the Canadian public...
That to be fair, is probably the best description of Ensacop that I've heard from a politician, right? The most well-rounded, I think. Although there are still criticisms of it, but that does sort of clear things up a little bit, that they are able to look at what CSIS is doing and write reports on how they can improve their processes and make it more secure, or change it in whatever way, and report that to the public, not the sensitive information. So you can see there are pros and cons to almost everything, right? This is why on this channel I don't say that I'm a supporter of any individual political party, because every individual instance is a different instance to look at, and you should look at it with fresh eyes outside of the I like this party or I hate this person mentality, right? I think when we get to a point where people are so focused on not liking somebody or really liking somebody, then that can kind of blind to individual situations as things change, right? Of course, you consider what has happened in the past, but I think that you should judge politicians like on a daily basis as well, and take that sort of daily and situation-specific judgment into consideration, as well as the long term of what has happened and what they have done. Maybe that's too centrist of me to sort of look at each situation like it's new, but that's kind of the way I like to run this channel, is that no one is beyond reproach, and also no one is no one is absolutely perfect, right? And we try to sort of look at things like through that lens.
Realistically expect from this Ensacop report? And will it be sufficient enough to alleviate the concerns of 7 in 10 Canadians who think this is a major threat and a major issue?
The announcement today is on a special rapporteur. Special independent rapporteur who will be charged with looking over the entire landscape of Canada's national security agencies and tools to counter foreign interference. That includes Ensacop, it includes NCIRA, it includes Elections Canada inquiries or investigations into election. It includes any other part of what the government does to counter foreign interference. This special rapporteur will have the clearances and the power to look at everything that Canada is doing and has done, and make recommendations on what we need to do further, including, if necessary, a formal inquiry or commission or whatever they determine is the right thing to do. That's where Canadians can have confidence that we are removing this from the political parties, including the political party that happens to be in government right now, and saying this is a matter that all Canadians, regardless of who they voted for or didn't vote for, should be able to be reassured is the right process to examine what is a very concerning issue around foreign interference, but that has been elevated to a level of partisan disagreements that has made it difficult for any party, including the party in government, to reassure Canadians that whatever we're doing is going to be enough and sufficient. That's where a special rapporteur to come in and survey the landscape and ensure that everything we do will be sufficient to reassure Canadians that our democracy remains strong and that the tools we have to counter ongoing foreign interference are the right ones.
You announced that you'll be starting consultations on a foreign agent registry.
Yeah, I think that's a good point there that you're saying. Sheridan Forbes says, "I'm not a lawyer, so don't judge my politician. So I don't judge my politicians by the laws. They make many new ones, too many new ones to keep up with. But I do judge them by my standard of living. Has it gotten better or worse?" Right? Yeah, that's a good point. It's like maybe you can sort of aggregate the decisions that they're making and not pay attention, hyper focused, and as closely as we like to do here on the channel. Maybe you can just say, "Hey, has my quality of life gotten better or worse under government?" and use that as a distinction as to who you vote for. I think that's a good point. But I think that this point that's being made here also by Trudeau is a valid one, at least in saying that people need to trust in our institutions in order for them to function properly. And it can't be partisan in the way we look at this. I think the main area that he's misstepping here in a big way is it being the special report or rapporteur, the person who's going to provide this review, is going to be appointed by him, right? Like, that's not just like, that's what people are going to end up saying about this, not the multiple things he's trying to do to make this nonpartisan. In a lot of people's eyes, I think it's just not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough if he's the one that's choosing the person that's going to write this report, even if it is a mutually respected, independent person that conservatives like and liberals like. For a certain amount of people, that's not going to be enough. And I think that if he had, although it would be more complicated and more challenging for him and potentially open it up to more partisanship, if he could somehow put together a panel equally weighted of all each political party, and then they choose the person, maybe that would be better. Maybe that would play out better. I think that's the one area of misstep. I think in practice, this is a good idea, right? To have someone decide what we do about this rather than it being partisan. But the fact that he's the one sort of choosing who that is, I think is the big misstep.
Why did it take your government so long to do that, given that our U.S. and Australian counterparts already have one in place? And what's the timeline on when you will have one?
It is something that has long been discussed. There are lessons to be learned about the impact and effectiveness of what some of our allies are doing and have done. Of course, we're learning from them, and we're consulting with Canadians to make sure that as we move forward, it be both effective and impactful. But I'm happy to turn it over to Minister Mendicino to follow up on that a little bit. Marco.
Yes, and thank you for the question. First, I think it's very important that we signal our intent to launch a consultation, a public engagement on the potential creation of a foreign agent registry. As the Prime Minister has said, as we embark on this dialogue, it is important that we bring along all communities and Canadians. It is important that we embed in this instrument the values of the Charter, which must be a bedrock in the way in which we strike the balance of protecting our institutions, but doing so in a manner that fully respects the individual rights and values of every Canadian. The last thing I'll say before turning it back to you, Prime Minister, is that this latest step builds on the concrete actions of this government since we took the reins in 2015. And it is important that all of the tools that we have put into place are attached to the corresponding transparency that is required of them as we imbue them to our national security agencies. It is imperative that this work is done responsibly, and this conversation will help to advance that work.
Thank you. Next question.
What a word salad.
Émilie
Oh my
Bergeron, la
God.
presse canadienne. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Dans le cas de la commission Rouleau, il y a eu des questions qui touchaient la sécurité nationale. Il y a eu des documents qui n'ont pas pu être dévoilés. Ça n'a pas empêché le commissaire de faire son travail et d'apprendre des nouvelles choses. Là, on entend...
Spécial indépendant à un membre de commission pour avoir établir ses procédures, tout ce qui est nécessaire.
La commission d'enquête.
But many of those recommendations claim that it does 17 when you're closer.
Crédible qui pourrait très bien faire ce travail.
Prochaine question.
Yeah, Ryan Hamilton, National Post. Sir, Ensacop has existed since 2017 when your government brought it into power. It has made many, many recommendations across many reports, and it has complained that it does not receive responses from your government, that many of those recommendations come unanswered. And the same is true of James Judd's report after the 2019 election. Many of his recommendations have not been responded to. So why is this time going to be different?
Actually, following the Judd report in the 2019 election, we did move ahead significantly with a number of his recommendations, and they were integrated into the panel in 2021. When we created Ensacop in 2017, it was a brand new institution in Canada. The previous Conservative government had refused to give parliamentarians from opposition parties the security clearances necessary to oversee and look into the actions of our national security agencies. And we felt that was a weakness, which is why we brought in a National Security Committee composed of parliamentarians from all parties who could lean in directly on what our national security agencies and report back to Parliament what they'd found, what was working, what was not, and make recommendations. Indeed, we have to do a better job of following up on those recommendations. I fully accept that. That is why I've tasked Minister LeBlanc within 30 days to put forward a response to the recommendations made by the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, among other reports that still hadn't been responded to.
So that's interesting, because that is something that Ensacop, what do they call it? They say Ensacop. Way longer. Too many syllables. Ensacop. That's just 3 instead of 4. But what they're saying here is that Ensacop has just been providing these recommendations, but you haven't been doing anything about it. So how's that going to be any different? Trudeau says, because we have Minister Dominic LeBlanc over here sort of focusing on implementing all of the previous recommendations that we kind of threw under the rug before we got in trouble for this in the news, he's going to implement those all now, along with whatever new ones come from the Special Rapporteur. And thank you, Deborah, again, for the support with the super chat there. And I did not call the unvaxxed names. Yeah, that's something that a lot of folks were frustrated with, right? Is the comments around the sort of fringe comments around folks that are more right leaning, sort of saying you are separate from us. That's what a lot of folks were frustrated about in that interpretation of what he said there around the time of the convoy.
Ensacop reports can also be edited by your government. You hold the right to remove details from that, and you have done that in previous reports. Are you going to take a lighter approach on this report, given the importance to the Canadian public?
That's an excellent question, because it is something that concerns Canadians, and I can reassure people that redactions or edits to reports for security purposes are not done by politicians. They are done by the professional public service along very specific objective criteria. We do not redact those reports. The professional public service does.
Next question.
Steve Chase, Globe and Mail. Thanks for taking our questions. Last week at the PROC committee, Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP told MPs that they're not investigating any allegations of election interference in the 2019 or 2021 elections. Today, however, we learned the RCMP is investigating the leaks. They're investigating those, and they've given a statement to media. So I want to ask you, did your office, your government refer the matter to the RCMP?
No.
And do you think it's the appropriate focus to focus on the leaks as opposed to the allegations?
First of all, it is not appropriate for...
That is a spicy question. That is a spicy question. Holy. The RCMP said that they're investigating the leaks, the CSIS document leaks to Sam Cooper of Global News, and not investigating what the content of the allegations. Wow.
Does your office, your government refer the matter to the RCMP?
No.
And do you think it's the appropriate focus to focus on the leaks as opposed to the allegations?
First of all, it is not appropriate for politicians to direct our police services to do or to not do investigations. We can certainly ask, but the RCMP makes its determinations based on what they have. And I can assure you that the RCMP was fully up on concerns around foreign interference because the task force, because of the work the panel did, they looked into these issues in 2019 and 2021 and made a determination to not pursue any criminal investigations. They are now deciding to pursue a criminal investigation or an investigation into the various national security breaches that we've seen over the past months. And that is their decision to do. One of the strengths of Canada is the independence of our institutions, and knowing that politicians can't direct or prevent RCMP or other police agencies from doing their jobs of keeping Canadians safe and making sure that the law is upheld.
A little bit of a non-answer, a little bit of a nothing burger there. This sort of points to another thing that was being said in committee, which was like, and this was asked of a couple of different panelists, mostly by Liberal committee members. They were asking, well, could these leaks themselves, the alleged leaks from CSIS to Global News, could that itself be foreign interference? sort of trying to make the point that, like, are these leaks actually coming from CSIS, or are they coming from someone posing as CSIS, trying to throw doubt on the whole situation and allegations and Sam Cooper's journalism. I found that interesting. It didn't make it into the video because you can only talk about so much. The video that was posted yesterday, that will give you a lot more context on this if you haven't already watched it. But I found that rather interesting.
When we started reporting on these reports, intelligence reports from CSIS, you said that foreign interference is something you're well familiar with and you've been dealing with it for a long time. Last week, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs was asked how many Chinese diplomats have been expelled in the last 4 years, and the answer was 0. Can you explain why there's not been one single Chinese diplomat expelled over the last 4 years?
Anytime we are presented with evidence, we act. If we have been presented with credible evidence of wrongdoing, of foreign agents or officials breaking Canadian laws, we would have acted. Lack of evidence means we have not acted. We are a country of laws, of rules, of evidence, and if we do not get concrete, clear evidence, we will not take action. That's what Canadians expect. But I can highlight that neither the Foreign Minister nor I have ever been accused of being shrinking violence when it comes to standing up for our values and our country with foreign dignitaries or interlocutors or even leaders. We will consistently stand up for what Canadians believe in and what our values are, because that's what people elected us to do.
We have time for one more question and one more follow-up.
Madeleine Clémorin, Radio-Canada. Monsieur Trudeau, vous avez dit que ce serait facile de déclencher
qui ont l'indépendance de juge, soit une spéciale notre démocratie.
Comme Ensacop, comme Ensira.
It seems like that's the end of the video. Interesting last question there, right? Can you explain why there have been no Chinese diplomats expelled as a result of some of the intelligence that's been leaked? And if you're being constantly updated with these sort of alleged interference that's being planned, how come there hasn't been any sort of expulsion of diplomats? Trudeau says we just haven't gotten solid evidence enough to do such a thing. And this is something that's kind of backed up with what was said in committee by the panelists, saying it's very, very challenging to move something from intelligence to hard evidence that can actually be acted upon. Apparently, intelligence briefings come in regularly every single day, and on those briefings, there's sort of a disclaimer and a caveat that says, here's how confident we are in this intelligence. So one, all of the different sort of intelligence briefings are of varying levels of credibility themselves. But two, very hard to bring intelligence from these ideas of like what we think is happening to actually hard evidence that we can use to justify taking action. But certainly nobody would want to do something that wasn't justified with actually having hard evidence that is something that actually happened. Right? Did that make sense what I was saying? Nobody would want to sort of expel someone if it turns out that they actually weren't a part of this. So taking just intelligence and acting upon what is essentially rumors until you have hard evidence is a dangerous road to go down. And it seems like one they're not willing to go down. Man, I'm curious what you think of this entirely. We're going to hold a poll here, and I want to sort of see, is this enough for you? Is this enough to convince you that enough is being done on election interference? Or on the other hand, do you think that maybe perhaps because this special rapporteur is being appointed by Trudeau and a lot of this stuff is being handled by the Liberal government who could have benefited from such interference in the 2021 and 2019 election, do you think that this is enough for you? We're going to hold a poll. It's enough and not enough. And let me know. You can actually click it in the chat, and you can sort of see what the percentage is from the folks that are here. I can see a lot of people saying it in the chat, but you can actually click on it to sort of see. We got 14 votes in, 21, 26, 29. What are your thoughts? This is a chance. Okay, so starting to lean in the way of of not enough on my end that I can sort of see here. For some folks it is enough, and for some folks it isn't. Leaning towards not enough. I like that we have a sort of different opinions here amongst the people on this channel. Yeah, Alan says, is Russell trolling us? No, I try to stay unbiased. Like, I try to not come to conclusions myself and just bring you the information that I've sort of aggregated from watching videos and reading articles, and let you make your own mind up about it. But it seems like you've made up your mind about this one. Let's end this poll, and you should be able to see the results here. 95% not enough, 4% it's enough. And even if all of the actions that this special rapporteur was coming up with, all the things that they're planning to do, even if that would be enough, for a lot of people, it's not going to be enough because of the fact that it's appointed by Trudeau. I think that that's the main misstep and the main takeaway for me here on this stream and watching this video, is that for a lot of people it's going to be enough. For a lot of people it is, for sure. But I think there's going to be a large group of people that, even if this was the exact right step to take, the one misstep of having it be appointed by the Liberal government and by Trudeau will ruin the credibility of all of this for a lot of people. So, yeah, Clone 42, that might be a good description for me. Russell Matthews is dangerously nonpartisan. Yeah, there are certain points where I wonder, is like, when should I say something about the way I feel in certain situations, and when should I hold back? I think for the credibility of the channel, and for people to sort of not say that you are one way, and to be able to actually change people's minds about things by bringing more centrist content, that it's kind of worth it. But maybe that's something that I'll change in how I act on this channel. But I think we're going to wrap it up there, folks. But I appreciate you all for coming in and tuning in here, especially on such short notice. Oh my gosh, such a short notice. Man, what am I saying today? Whew. Long day. It's, what is it, 10 o'clock now? 10:10. We're going to call it there. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. And thank you so much to the people who either are joined the channel by clicking that join button and joining the membership. Just helps to support the channel. And the folks who super chatted, and the folks who liked and subscribed and hit the notification bell so that you're notified next time we go live here together. Appreciate everyone tuning in. I hope this video helped you out, get a little bit more understanding of what's gone on here. Thanks so much to Gary, Clone, Glenn, Millhouse, Jody, Superstitious, Matthew, Sheridan, Tyra, Rancor, Pebbles, BC Proud, Singh, Matthew. Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate you all, and we'll see you next time that we do this. Thanks for being here, everyone. We'll see you next time.